It was quite interesting to see Norristown shopkeepers put a pug, pugilist journalist in Robert Kennedy Jr.'s face. And he became stonewalling on the subject of Kennedy's uncle John being mowed down in Dallas by nefarious organized criminals in higher estates of government. As if to say you're emotionally unhinged to try to get him to become emotionally unhinged because he cut him off mid sentence. And Kennedy said, "Would you let me finish?" And he said, see, you're emotionally unhinged with his body language. Now, nobody in the audience bought it. Kennedy was understood as resigning himself to the sad situation. Now, the Kennedys have been attacked. Cersei was murdered. My letter to them was delivered. I was given a nerve agent. Robert Kennedy is that voice again. And there's mighty perplexing things to describe about what happened to Ted, his third uncle. His first uncle being killed in a suicide mission during the war. Of course, his father. I remember all of that, the waiting. While he was at his father's side, I was tending the sorrows of waiting. But this is to address the perplexity of a situation because, of course, Norristown is where Will Zell is from, one of the most conspicuous assassins in the AIDS attack situation. If that comes out, RFK will be obliged to answer some questions about his auntie, Onassis, because Schwarzenegger pulled a number in that family. Families are deceived by the CIA in their brochures. If you want to be hired, you have to promise you will deceive your family. And the family may very well be a target. The man from Uncle makes clear what these people are capable of. It's one of the, they actually predicted how JFK Jr. would look in a sequence about what they called the Bealers, which is a rock band half named for Beatles and half named for Hitler, Bealers. It's all indexed. So when you look at Swimmer and the Carbonell apparatus that mistranslated for Putin, the implant from Roger Waters, you have Waters and Swimmer. You have Bush, who was pulled out of the water and blamed my father's radio room banter. So they hot-wired me up for radio room dacoitery that they could mistranslate for the world to make a squall that the whole world is against adultery or something, free love, whatever the very hypnosis that they were promoting for their pornographic genocide. Where I grew up in Pittsburgh, people just slept around, and then the dacoitery from this machine came in, and Zoom, Peep, for collections, leaky jobs, collection services. That's right, museum thieves. So, and they crow that they're the all poors. They're representing the exterminated against completely innocent people because they have this idea of hypnography. If it's a black, it inherently isn't guilty. And the white who observations this mentality is doubly guilty. Now, so, you know, we all have agreed that it's nefarious to um, be racist. Nobody um, believes any of that stuff anymore about eugenics, you know, racial superiority and all that. It's misconditioned into our memory banks from an old culture of Southern wars. But doubly problematic, however, if you get perplexed, you're going to see where you're stuck in the index waters, and swimmer don't prove nothing, bro. The sum total property of all coincidences in the matter is zero, of course. I mean, when you actually look at the activated index gates, like Watergate, you see that it happened. And it does, in fact, trace to the Beatles. But it can only be explained by Lenin's Houdini, which is Casper. They gave a slippy poo of Hitler and Lenin, and they called it the spirit of mass media. Dan Rather and George Takei manning the switchboards like this. Okay, so you're going to be perplexed when you realize, if you ever realize, that the machines of behind the scenes have been occupied by Axis Hollywood. You'll be perplexed. This was all Reagan's mania. So it's like a 50-50 deal with the macabre thing, and it goes on in Putin and Bush's heads, the New World Order. The New World Order has some explaining to do. But when you get into black psychology of blacks is that individual advancement is not the individual failure is not represent the problem. It's institutional opportunities have been blocked. In schools, if you don't have black teachers, you don't have black role models, and so on. And this sets them up for accomplice in things like Pussy Ball Derby and the AIDS atrocity. They behind the scenes, they openly advocated for the killers. Wilso Brown, a white racist in the Green Party, which murdered my father, much to the satisfaction of the NAACP because of their white patriarch lunacy, was considered an honorary representative of the Jewish Defense League by the Jeffries Corporation, who drew a line in the sand for the love of Winona over Midori Goto's black belt in feminism concerning Fripp's hypothesis that virginity proves rape in the case of Leslie Katz. Okay, and this is some woo of Peter Sinfield and Roger Waters and Yoko Ono and Tamo DeJong. If you don't know Tamo DeJong, you'll never understand how Will Zell could be, who espouses Joseph Goebbels, could be an honorary defendant of the Jewish Defense League. And Hakeem Jeffries jumps down, holds worm, and says, "We will crush the anti-Semite who tries to defend himself from the claim that virginity proves rape." Zoy! Now we see Biden collecting $5 million from the Saudis and that. Old Totality Joe at the helm. So when you're perplexed about this, what you need to understand is that behind the scenes, in the Museum Thief Business by John Shulman, the Seattle Clubhouse, the Museum Thief Network of Fountain House in New York, allied to the Yoko Ono and pulling all kinds of stunt, giving me Parkinson's, threatening to inject me for Clint Eastwood, is organized by his machine of queer trannies. Okay, you can't better a queer tranny in Tamo DeJong's tarot card deck. That's the highest ace of all. That's the invisible fifth ace that Trumpy Tune always has up his sleeve. Behind the museum, that behind all the wall sound that the NAACP puts up about institutional systemics is a couple of lopers who privately have it in for Jimmy Crary because his father crossed them and so on. That's it. And they can make all this song and dance. I mean, in Tacoma, they can't even feed somebody without turning it into a conspiracy. They robbed me in Pittsburgh of a painting that was invaluable, sell it, and tell me how generous they were in ripping me off. And they make these stories up because they love to be cruel to the mind, because the YMCA sees Jimmy Creary as a special project of Hitler Reagan, because I dared to call him that. But the semiotic evidence shows that it was Hitler and Reagan. That's the whole point. The demagogical personality cult of machine gunning the peasants and calling them terrorists had to do with what J. Edgar Hoover pursued in hiding Adolf Hitler, where they found Eichmann in Mendoza, Argentina. They even used Mendoza line for 2.0 batting average because it was a two virgins pussy bowl operation. And Lennon named the game. The fact that he pulled a Houdini is written into all of those stupid movies. We have a huge problem in the cinema bank history of this operation, but it can be identified. That's why Roger Waters is so bloodthirsty, because he knows that it can be identified. It's a showdown with the Axis. And the best way to deal with it is to acknowledge it and unplug it legislatively. For people like Hakeem Jeffries to get off their stupidity horse